I'm excited about this panel. So just as the enabling environment for investment in the ecological transition and in nature in Brazil is evolving, so too in the global environment, the enabling environment for putting capital to work around nature themes has accelerated massively in the last 48 months. We have groups like Nature Finance that are influencing the way central banks and finance ministries are thinking about it. We have an entire nature positive movement and an intellectual architecture around what nature positive means and how you measure it. We have groups like Finance for Biodiversity, the Natural Capital Investment Coalition, and importantly, the TNFD. We have biodiversity management guidelines at the IFC and dozens of financial institutions now initially screening for biodiversity risks across their portfolio, and now they're looking for nature positive opportunities and starting to think about nature as infrastructure. I gotta say, that was my wildest dream. Also, capital formation around nature-based solutions is going much faster than most people realize, with dozens of funds in formation, both inside and outside Brazil. We've captured more than 30 fund announcements. Our rough estimate is that at least $10 billion has been raised or is being raised directly for nature-positive, nature-based solutions or natural capital-themed funds, primarily in private markets. And that does not even include the funds that have been raised focused on what we'll call the future of agriculture and regen ag. Pensions like leading pensions like CalSTRS, Texas Teachers, and many of the leading Canadian pensions and also the Australian pensions are now forming programs around nature, have nature strategy professionals, and many have started to allocate to some of the leading funds in the space, and so has the insurance industry. Most of the very large asset management firms in the world, whether they're JP Morgan, Temasek, Goldman Sachs, Macquarie, TPG, or UPS, either have a nature strategy lead or they've actually formed funds in this space. And this even includes our own Santander here. Today, we are honored to have with us 4 of the leading fund managers in the nature-based solutions and natural capital arena. All 4 are managing large funds in the space that are international. All 4 are pioneer investors that today others are trying to emulate or copy already. Initially, we'll hear from each of them about their fund or investment program, and importantly, why they were attracted to Brazil for nature-based solutions. So I'd like to start off our panel here with Van, and just to give you a sense of the format here. We'll have each speak for about 3 to 4 minutes about what they're doing. Then I'll pose a question to each fund manager, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. The Q&A you can either do on the app, which would be great because I can see the questions, or if the app's not working for you, we can take some Q&A for the audience. We've got 36 minutes. That's a relatively tight time frame. I'm going to try to keep us on time. Let's go.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having us here today. I'm with Carbon Direct. Important to point out, Carbon Direct has 2 sides. So we have Carbon Direct Inc., which you may know from our advisory work. Every year we develop a high-quality criteria for carbon removal along with Microsoft. And we've diligenced a lot of the Microsoft deals that have taken place in Brazil. So we were the diligence team for Mambach, for Regreen, for BTG, and have found Brazil to, of course, be an area that has consistently produced high-quality carbon projects. We also have Carbon Direct Capital. Carbon Direct Capital has an NbS fund that we're currently deploying into project equity in carbon projects. We're looking at several projects in Brazil. Before this meeting, I was in the field diligencing a project, and we're going to have another diligence team coming down next week to look at more projects. A couple of things about the fund that are probably key to understand. The first one is we're really interested in investing in carbon. So we are willing to take the risk on the carbon market and willing to provide financing for the project itself. We don't want to own the land. We're not land investors, which is actually a great fit for Brazil, we're finding, with lots of lease options and lots of ability to provide the financing to get the trees in the ground without owning the land. I want to talk real quickly about what Carbon Direct is probably best known for, which is our quality criteria that we apply when we assess each project, both on the advisory side, but also to our investment committee where they're making investment decisions. We have 6 criteria. These are environmental harms and benefits, additionality, leakage, MMRV, durability, and social impacts. And Brazil does well in all of these 6. I want to touch on a few real quick. The first one is the environmental benefits. The environmental benefits of restoration projects in Brazil are as strong or stronger than anywhere in the world. This is well documented by scientists, well known by investors, and something that Brazil can really hang its hat on. The second area that I think is probably a little bit less known to investors, but I think is important, is that Brazil is actually one of the leading places for MMRV, or monitoring the projects. Brazil has built large, influential, high-tech data pipelines that allow us to track the projects and diligence the projects in ways that are, quite simply not possible in other countries. I think a lot of investors may not understand the amount of investment Brazil has made over time in building up an infrastructure of information that actually makes it quite, from a scientific perspective, quite manageable to try to diligence projects in Brazil and monitor those projects in the long term. The final part that I want to touch on is the social impacts of investment in Brazil. On the positive side, of course, there's many rural communities and indigenous communities who can benefit from climate investments in Brazil. I think this is well known in the market. And of course, there's the challenges that come along with investing in Brazil, especially regarding land tenure. Our experience has been that these risks can be mitigated through long-term planning, through working with the right partners, and that relative to other countries we're invested in and doing diligence, these problems are not really unique or different, right? If you're investing anywhere in the world where land is relatively inexpensive and you're trying to do carbon projects, be that in Africa, be that in other countries in South America, you actually run into many of the same problems that you see here in Brazil. So I guess just to summarize here in the last 30 seconds, we've spent a lot of time in Brazil. We've looked at a lot of projects, and we found that this is a place that sort of is uniquely qualified to meet our quality criteria for high quality carbon removal.
Thank you, Van. I'd like to now switch to Tobias, talk a little bit about Nuveen.
Thanks, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm here representing Radar and through Radar Nuveen. And why is that? Radar is a JV between Cosan, a Brazilian agricultural player, and Nuveen, which is TIA's investment asset manager with about $1.4 trillion under management, and the second largest natural capital investor worldwide. So it's a pleasure to be here and talk about a bit about kind of the opposite of what Van was saying. We specialize in land acquisition, so our big focus is actually, we should work together certainly, is actually acquiring land. And we've been doing so in Brazil for Brazilian and international investors since 2008. Build a portfolio mostly focused on higher and better use. So what we do and what our core is actually looking for land which is being used beneath its potential and upgrading this land, where it's, be it agriculture, be it restoration, be it ecological services. And I think what's really nice about this and what people don't say enough is Brazil has a lot of potential in already existing converted land, so there's zero need for land conversion. We are a bit low profile, and it's very, I'm very happy to be able to say this here. We pioneered zero deforestation policies in land acquisition in Brazil. So it's been a long time since we have not bought land that has been recently deforested. We don't deforest land that we bought. And we're actually very proud to say that we reforest land that we bought, around 500 hectares a year that we're replanting, mostly Mata Atlântica and Cerrado in the state of São Paulo. But it's a very great way to be here, and we always look forward to partnerships with big players. And in the end, bringing a bit this overview of what Brazil represents here is there are challenges, certainly similar to other regions in the world, but Brazil also has a very strong institutional structure, and we are very happy to be able to provide as Radar this comfort for institutional international investors to be investing in Brazil for this long period and actually leveraging both the international and national domestic capital in land investments. And something that is very attractive in Brazil, looking at land, is Brazil is very uniquely positioned worldwide. And we look to explore this in the best manner possible. Again, higher and best use, so we just make sure that we're looking at the best possible use for that land so that we are able to reforest land. And what's very attractive for institutional and international investors is actually that land is has a different risk, is a kind of de-risking strategy for normal investors. So when you're looking at carbon, for example, you have a natural hedge through land. So composition of this portfolio is very positive. And here, maybe a challenge that we're facing for institutional investors, and that we're trying to, in a way, hedge as well, is carbon is not a commodity yet. I don't think it should be a commodity, but it should be treated a bit more like a commodity. I think it's very similar to what Danielle was saying in the previous panel. You need off-takers, you need people that are actually buying in, you need guaranteed volume, so that you have investors putting the money in here and saying, okay, I'll have a positive side out of this. And this is also strength of Brazil when we look at regenerative agriculture, where we are able to combine carbon, which might have from the institutional investor a higher risk, with something that is Brazil's main strength, with this agriculture, and which can be improved a lot from where we are right now. So I think what we are trying to do at Radar, at Nuveen, is kind of trying to bring together the strengths of Brazil, where you have strong institutions, you have really good land, and you can bring both preservation and agriculture together.
Thank you. Renata, can you tell us a bit about what climate asset management's doing and how you function, what your asset class is, and how you look at Brazil?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Tony, for being here. It's a pleasure. Just a little bit about climate asset management. So we're a joint venture of HSBC and Pollination. We're founded in 2020. We have about $1 billion under management now. And we have mainly 3 funds. One of them is the Natural Capital Fund. We have the Carbon Nature Fund and the Nature-Based Carbon Fund. And overall, our strategy is to invest in real assets for investment, for real assets return, and also for carbon. And I think a little bit about what we're looking for in our investment strategies is that we invest in carbon projects, for example, through equity, debt. We do prepayment, but we prefer also a milestones-based payment. And we're looking into projects that they're in an earlier stage and we help them scale. So really, we see our capital as a post-feasibility study, but also helping them to scale and get the funding that they need to get out of the ground. And I think one point that it would be nice to touch on is that it's kind of a mix of what has been said here, is that we have also, because we're a natural capital investor, we can invest actually for both at the same time. So we see Brazil with a great opportunity to invest for example, projects that have commercial returns, such as agroforestry. When they have cacao, acai, or other sources of revenue, we can come in the structure as an investment for commercial returns, as well as a carbon offtake. So I think that combines a little bit what has been mentioned before. Yeah, and then we're very excited about Brazil in the sense of the developers' capacity, the ability to scale, and how the industry has been developing so far. It seems to be very established. It's becoming more established worldwide and very attractive.
Thank you. And Raphael, with Just Climate?
Thank you, Tony, for the invitation. Thank you, Vivi. I'm not seeing Vivi here. And Renata, I missed you on the Monday call with Tripurari. But it's tough to talk about us after all, you guys. So I'm Raphael. I'm representing Generation Just Climate. Generation, as I discussed, is the pioneer investor in sustainability. We manage $40 billion under the Just Climate entity, where we concentrate the NbS investments. And climate investments. We manage $2 billion. Latin America / Brazil is probably the most relevant region for the fund. We have 3 global offices. It's UK, San Francisco, and São Paulo. And 20% of our workforce is in São Paulo. So that shows our level of commitment to the region. It's really interesting to hear Daniel from HSBC, Mario from Brazil government, Nabil from BNDES, and all you guys saying, because when I think about blended finance, when I think about different structures, I can see a lot of discussions on that. I can see a lot of discussions on carbon, a lot of discussions on land, a lot of discussions on project level, and we are here to support equity at top level, at Topco, to support the strategy behind the business models. So we have two global funds which can allocate money and capital in Brazil, and we have a regional strategy. On those strategies, when I think, Tony, about NbS, we focused on restoration, we focus on agroforestry systems, but we also focus on the land transition for agriculture. So we spend a lot of time on novel technologies for bio-inputs. So we have investments in RNA, for example. We look to methane reduction. We know livestock is critical for Brazil. So finding solutions that help to decarbonize that sector. We look a lot for soil health. This is, I like to say internally, this is the holy grail. Once we fully understand what is being produced below the land and not only on the top of the land, this will be critical for Brazil. And we also focus a lot on the enablers for the future of this industry. So one of the examples, everyone talks about carbon a lot, but biodiversity is critical. Everyone talks a lot about Amazon, but we forgot that we lost 95% of the biodiversity in Mata Atlântica, in the rainforest. So we sponsored a company that David from Earth Price Shop mentioned yesterday, which is Nature Metrics, because we believe through Nature Metrics, which does eDNA for biodiversity, facilitates for the companies to do the measurements, we can allow for future revenue streams for those restoration projects, which is biodiversity credits. So just to finalize, Tony and Vivi, we are extremely happy to participate. We're extremely happy to deploy more capital in this region, and hopefully we can, make great connections here and find solutions to the challenges that we have on deploying capital.
Thank you, Raphael. I want to start the Q&A in a slightly different way, which is the following. What I'd like you to say very quickly, I just go through the exact same order. When you think about your fund, what do you think of the asset class is that you represent to the LP community? And what do you think is the right rate of return that you're presenting to the LP community over what time? These are the four leading funds that are actually putting capital into the development community, both on the land side, the restoration side, and the carbon side. So understanding how they narrate their story to the capital market is really important, as well as how they're telling their IPs about what they expect to deliver. So to the extent that you can touch on that, I would really appreciate it. Van?
Sure. So, not to give specific numbers, but we'll say that, carbon is riskier than other parts of the market. So our return expectations are therefore a little bit higher, and higher than a typical fund that does agriculture or does timber. One thing that we see in the fund, and one of the strategies that we have that I didn't mention the first time around is right, we see Carbon Direct as having a really unique view of the market because we work with the biggest buyers, and we have a big science team. We have 60 people at Carbon Direct Inc. who can help the fund make good decisions. So part of our strategy is we think we can invest in the right projects to de-risk them for a short period of time, 3 to 5, 7 years. And then when those are issuing, it can be sold to a lower cost of capital. So the exit is part of our strategy and how we anticipate meeting our fund returns.
Thank you. Tobias?
I think from our side, Tony, we're looking at returns which are high single digit, low double digits. Overall, why is it a bit lower than what Van was saying with carbon? We see land as a natural hedge to volatility and inflation. We understand that our principal is actually protected when we invest in land. And we're looking at longer term. So we're looking at 10, 20 years. And I think that's a bit of a difference in an investment concept. I don't think there's right or wrong. I think it's very important what Van was saying. You need the short term as well to make sure the project starts. Especially when we're looking at additionality, we're looking at permanence. We see our investment is very important because the only way you can actually make sure that the forest will be protected over 50 years is if you own the land, because the land is where the forest is planted on. So that's why we're usually looking for a bit lower returns, but we understand that long term it's a very attractive investment, and it has this core volatility hedge component to it by being land. So that's a bit of what we're looking at.
And do you, following on, do you see the same applying in the restoration and integrated pasture?
It's the same. It's very similar. And yeah, what we're looking at when we look at the land is we try, and I'll go back to the higher and best use. We'll look at land. If you imagine land as a degraded pasture, there will be a part of it you can do Regina Act with it. You can do soybeans. You can do cacao, cocoa. You can do coffee. Whatever. There will be a part where you can intensify livestock use so you don't have leakage. And there will be still a part where you can reforest, replant, and the part you will protect. So when you look at the whole project, I think we stay at this very similar return levels with this long-term component.
Great. So more of a mosaic approach. Renata?
Yes, thank you. I think our fund is a bit of a mix then of what you've said. So when we invest for carbon, we aim to retire those credits to our LPs. So we really are looking to develop the credits and then retire them in the longer term. We're not looking to sell or anything for investment returns on that. So it's a composition for our fund of how much we can develop these costs of credits, as well as what is, when we deploy for natural capital, the investment returns that we can get on typical agriculture, forestry. I think it's important to say that we invest globally, so it will really depend on the composition of the portfolio. We have, for example, for our natural capital strategy, in developed economies, but we're also able to invest portion of the capital in emerging markets. So that's why we think Brazil is a very good opportunity, and we tend to mitigate risks through diversification. We can also look for projects, ARR projects, agroforestry. We're still investing in REDD+, and other types of carbon. So in the end, it will be a composition of the portfolio, the generation costs of these carbon credits. And I think one thing that Raphael said that I actually wanted to mention is that another strategy that we have is actually this partnering with developers that have good capacity and have also other ventures funding them on the company level. So that's why we have a good interaction with Just Climate, and that also improves our returns in the long term and making sure that the project will exist and be permanent and additional.
So, Raphael, I think you've just been characterized as an earlier stage investor, taking equity risk in developers. And I'm curious, how do you think of yourself as being positioned in the market, and what kind of returns are you looking at? You've done 2 deals now that have a venture quality to them, growth.
Yeah.
Feel free to elaborate.
Okay, tough question. First things first, I think this industry, regardless the size of the investments, because we can think about $10 million investments or, I don't know, $200 million investments. This is growth risk, because that's a new industry. So we're supporting companies to create the new technologies, to create the new models. The last panel we were discussing, HSBC had the slide here, was so complex to create on how to bring investors to the bond level. So we needed to create the capacity to innovate. So those are growth investments. I like the question on return, Tony, but I think we need to split into 2 different topics. It's investment cycle. So when I think, and Renata, we do the same, we think about portfolio construction. For those investments which are focused on sustainable agriculture, which is more focused towards kind of, growth investing with less hard assets with us, those are short cycles. So we tend to need additional return. We need to need more return because the investment period is shorter. But when I think about the restoration projects, the agroforestry projects, those are long-term. Duration plays an important role here. Duration for those projects, we are talking about 10, 15 years. So if I am to require high return rates for 10, 15 years, I may not be able to invest. So I would say from our side, portfolio construction is important. Shorter cycles require additional return, and I'm willing to take more risk. For the restoration and agroforestry projects, I'm willing to accept a lower return, but I need guarantees. I need off-takers. I need to understand how the full model is contemplated. And as I mentioned, we are equity holders on Topco. We can provide capital to project level as well, but our aim, like the nature of our investment is Topco. So probably a slightly higher return on Topco than project level.
And what's the duration of your vehicle?
Yeah, so we have different durations within our fund. So I'll give an example. One of our global funds is 15 years. The other one is 12, and the regional fund is 10.
Great. So one of the things that we did when we framed this panel is we were talking about Brazil as a preferred destination for nature-based solutions capital specifically. I'd love it if you could each speak a little bit about how you think about Brazil in the global context. And you can think about it with numbers, like as a percentage of your fund, how much do you think you would do in Brazil and why? And how does it compare to other emerging markets that you're looking at globally?
Yeah, so it depends on the strategy, but the way we think is, so global funds, I would say Brazil should represent an allocation of 20, a third. Those are large funds, so it's a matter of finding the opportunities, not a matter of defining how much we want to deploy here. The regional strategy obviously is mostly focused on Brazil. We expect to have, out of our 100, we expect to have 75, 80 allocated to Brazil. The reason we like the country, we like the region, is everyone knows, it's pretty obvious. NbS is probably Brazil is probably the best place to deploy capital. We have sun, we have water. Trees grow faster here, which plays a relevant role on carbon accounting, on timber production, or any crop production. There is plenty of availability on land. That not necessarily means land access is easy, and something we are bringing, something we've been creating the rationale is on how to access land. For those who are not from Brazil, you read like 200 million hectares, 100 and I don't know how much hectares of land availability, degraded land. Don't take it as granted. Probably everyone here in this stage had suffered to access land before. So we need to create on how to access those lands. Not to say, Tony, the agriculture powerhouse of the region. I'm like my family, we plant, so I like to say Brazil is many years ahead of regenerative agriculture. The way we plant, the way we use bio inputs, but we need to recreate the narrative. We need to recreate on how we position the country, and I think it's a relevant role from everyone in this stage as global funds to understand how we do, to deploy capital to support the transition, and to recreate the narrative. Hopefully, the country will do a good job on COP30.
Great. Van?
Yeah, our fund, we don't have a Brazil target, so to speak, but as I said, I was down here diligencing a project the week before. We have more people coming down next week. I anticipate, it will probably end up at a minimum of likely 30% or so. And for all the reasons we've discussed, it's if you want to invest in high quality carbon credits, Brazil's a great spot. Maybe just one thing to think about. Our team has analyzed most projects in the market for scientific quality, and the percent that pass in Brazil that we see is typically higher than other places in the world. So the pool that we're looking at, the first cut is the scientific quality of the credit, and Brazil does quite well relative to other places.
Thank you. And when you speak about Radar, can you think about it in the context of what Nuveen is doing globally in ag? Like, how does it sit in that context?
I think when we look historically to what we've done globally, Brazil and Latin America as a whole represent around 35% of the investments in agriculture by Nuveen. So it's very representative, and it's something that we're proud of. However, what we've seen in recent years is different appetite when you look at agricultural risk, mostly linked to institutional risk. And I think that's where, as Raphael was saying, where we have the narrative question, where the narrative out of Brazil has to get better, especially looking at nature protection, at restoration, all the ecological aspects. However, what we've seen also is a lot of individual institutional investors looking at SMAs, trying to invest in Brazil. So there is still a high demand for Brazil. The moment you're able to bring this narrative over and you explain how important Brazil is, not only on agriculture, but you're looking at ecological services, you're looking at protection, you're looking at ARR, Brazil is the place to be. And I think that's a narrative that's been gaining momentum, to use your words, Tony. And we're really happy to be part of this and try to raise more institutional capital for Brazil.
Great, thank you. Renata?
Yes, it's a bit hard to respond the question because we don't have exactly a limit also on a target allocation as well in Brazil. We would say we have always a limit allocation to Latin America. We always want to have a project in Brazil, Latin America, at least 1-2, we'd say until 20% of the fund. But also one thing that we also seek is diversified in types of crops and plantation. So one thing that is interesting about Brazil is because of the wide range of opportunities of agriculture, plantation, crops, if it's timber, cacao, or any other sort of commodity, we can actually deploy more capital in Brazil, but maintain this diversification of crops. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, I think that's basically it.
Great, thank you. So we've heard from, again, four of the leading fund managers in the space about both what they're doing, how they think about it from an asset management and an asset class perspective, how they rank Brazil, and how they rank Brazil compared to everything they're doing in other markets. Now I want to try to begin to change the complexion of our conversation by opening up to Q&A. And the first thing I want to try to do is see whether or not people have actually downloaded the Yazo app and whether it works for Q&A. So if we have no questions, I think we're going to actually open it up to open mic. So we have a really expert panel here. If there are any questions from the audience, don't be shy. Now's the time to grab a mic and ask them. Oh, come on. We did the kumbaya moment this morning where you turned around and you met each other. That worked well. All right, so I'm going to ask a question that is just a tough one. Oh, sorry. Mario, always with a good question.
Well, anyways, I'll do a quick question. We work with agriculture as well, right? And in Brazil, fertilizer is a big issue. I'd like to know if you guys have any position specifically or in general regarding fertilizers. I know it works both ways when we're talking about restoration and planting things.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and we import, I don't know, 95% of our fertilizers. We do have a view. So that's one of our most favorite topics as a fund. We have an investment in the US in a company called Pivot Bio, which does nitrogen fixing bacteria for corn and soy production. We are bringing Pivot Bio to Brazil. So we just launched last year in Brazil. So that's a biological product for fertilizer. The other route is green nitrogen from ammonia. So there are some relevant projects in Brazil. There are some tricky comments, and maybe, I don't know if someone can support me here, but it's unfair. It's unfair. So I was speaking to a phosphate producer who wants to do green phosphate in Brazil. He's charged ICMS in his production, while importing synthetic phosphate is free of charge. So we need to understand the boundaries of regulation in order to support the industry. Agriculture does not accept green premium. Like, it's impossible. For other applications, for example, synthetic, green ammonia, you can sell to mining, you can sell to agriculture. Probably mining, hopefully someone from Valley can say. It's easier to accept because the relevance of the cost is lower. But for agriculture, it's pretty high. So answering straight your question, we have investments in the sector. We are looking to opportunities in the region. And hopefully, I don't know, 5 years from now, we're going to see some production locally in Brazil. By the way, from an impact standpoint, logistics is incredibly high emitting. So we need to also think about local production to avoid vessels all over and everything that we've been seeing from a logistics standpoint.
I'd like just to add on, I think from an agricultural perspective, the most important thing is actually being sustainable. And being sustainable means not only using the green ammonia, which I think is amazing. If we could use it more, it would be incredible. But also making sure you have the right output with the minimum input. And I think that's something that Brazil, in a way, and I think it's something everyone who's a Brazilian should be proud about. Brazil is kind of a leading technology user in agriculture. There's still a lot of room to improve, but I think this improvement is happening. So actually using fertilizers is positive as long as it's not done wrong. And I think that's where we can still improve a lot. And I think just as a compliment on the logistics part, Rumo, who's a big logistics provider in Brazil, is also part of the Cosan group. And I think a lot of what they're trying to do is exactly making this logistics easier. And we see it with Rumo, we see it with a lot of other companies. And I think it's a huge investment, and it's really good to have the government here as well listening, because in the end, it needs government to help because it has an impact all across all industries. So for agriculture, for logistics, for carbon, I think it's very important to have this and have it in a sustainable manner. So making sure that the inputs get lower while the outputs rise.
Well, thank you. Well, with that, I'd like to give a round of thanks to our panelists. Van, Tobias, Raphael. Renata, thank you so much for giving us your perspectives on this and telling us about why Brazil is one of your favorite destinations for nature-based solutions investment. Thank you.